going a tad downhill. Trump himself is absolutely using his presidency to make money from his private business, who he remains the sole beneficiary of, which is absolutely unconstitutional. This is both frightening and it's kind of hilarious, because ultimately our corrupt president's plan to abuse and profit from being the leader of the free world is centered completely around a real estate grift and online merch. Again, he's definitely making a lot of money, but not nearly as much as a smarter corrupt person could, because he's using the presidency to sell witch hunt beer cozies. That is not a Photoshop. That is an actual thing you can buy in his official store. Hey ladies, buy this $55 Trump swimsuit and you could be the sexiest dame at the country club, provided you don't have blood coming out of your wherever. My point here is that yes, Donald Trump is obviously profiting from being president and should be held accountable. But he also sucks at business and is very obvious about his misdeeds. Which is why it's important to ask this very serious question. Who is profiting off of Trump's presidency that isn't a total dummy dumb fart brain dummaroo? Specifically, who in Trump's orbit is using their position to gain power and make profit? Because honestly, what else would they be doing? Trying to make a difference? Do you think any of them, many of which were terribly vetted before barely lasting a year or two, are in it to make a difference in the world? Do you think that? Let's dive right into this, immediately pushing through the family itself, aka the lesser Trumps. I don't want to spend too much time on them because we all kind of know exactly what they are. Obviously, you have Eric and Don Jr., those scraps, who are the ones officially running the Trump Organization, while also doing totally unrelated family activities like dining with the Queen while owning resorts in the UK. Overall, their shadiness is pretty unsurprising and exactly what you'd expect. And it sure seems like the public is catching on to this and taking the appropriate actions. With the Trump fam, the main grift is all real estate nonsense on a sliding scale of how good each family member is at making money. Clearly the top dogs are Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, who collectively made somewhere between $28 million and $135 million last year, other estimates saying at least $82 million. This was seemingly from various investments, Ivanka's personal brand, stake in Trump hotels, and Kushner's family real estate company. And again, this is all pretty straightforward for anyone who has already accepted the reality of having a president who doubles as the patriarch for a family of stereotypical 80s movie villains. But then we have that quiet little Jared, who certainly isn't a dumb fart brain dummaroo. Jared, the man tasked by our president to, amongst many other projects, bring peace to the Middle East, apparently via this weird vapid real estate brochure. Well, he owns a $25 million stake in the real estate investment firm Cadre, a company he was the co-founder of, but failed to publicly disclose for, some reason. Anywho, this company that he failed to disclose his connection to recently took advantage of opportunity zones, which is a tax incentive to develop in low-income communities. It's not a bad idea that was part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, something Ivanka, who Jared knows, was extremely supportive of. But that's not too terrible, right? Which is why I probably shouldn't have led with it, and instead mentioned that Cadre also received $90 million from anonymous offshore investors since 2017 via Goldman Sachs. Some definitely from Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I probably should have led with that instead. Probably should have led with stuff where the guy hired to oversee foreign policies tried to hide his stake in a company receiving mystery millions from various foreign interests. That seems like the thing I should have led with. And even though it feels like we should spend hours talking about Kushner and Trump's family and dig into all the ways they are profiting off of their power, we need to move on, because there are a lot of other sneaky Pete's to get to, which is why we're going to primarily focus on the biggest and most funnest grifters, like how the Oscars tried to shove all the technical awards into their commercial breaks. They aren't any less important, but sometimes you just have to trim things down for time. Sometimes. Next up, Elaine Chao, the United States Secretary of Transportation, is one half of the power couple between herself and the partially deflated dirt manatee that is Mitch McConnell, aka Mitch Lane, Elaine Chow. What is a fun nickname we can give them? Like, oh, how about Gravedigger of Democracy and millionaire using her government connections to help her family business? That works. That works perfectly. See, Elaine isn't new to serving on the U.S. cabinet, having previously served as U.S. Secretary of Labor for the entirety of the George W. Bush administration, where she left a legacy of neglecting to regulate workplace safety and wage law, often siding with businesses over workers, which is not shocking, considering that her father, James Chow, runs a large shipping company out of New York City. This makes her a pretty shady pick for both Secretary of Labor and Secretary of Transportation, otherwise known as the two things she has been. If you're one for keeping up, Elaine made recent headlines when it came to light that she had failed to cut her ties from Vulcan Materials, a construction company directly affected by Chow's decisions as head of the Department of Transportation. Having previously served 2 years on the board of directors, Chow was given $151,000 in stock options that she had agreed to receive a cash payout for as part of her ethics agreement from when she was hired. This is a thing she did, not do. And during her time as Transportation Secretary under Trump, the guy in charge of infrastructure policy directly affecting Vulcan Materials, this stock has risen by 20%. But hey, at least this particular corruption is also an incentive to fix our infrastructure, or at least Kentucky's infrastructure, where Chow directed grants of at least $78 million through a special liaison given to no other state that she assigned during Mitch McConnell's re-election. Mitch being a guy she, knows. Mitch is also the guy who blocked a larger infrastructure plan earlier in the year because it was too expensive and it didn't personally help his political goals. Of course, haven't we all used our jobs to help out a family member or friend? Like a hilariously unqualified family member or friend? Like giving a really important job to a family member or friend despite them having no experience with that job? Yes, meet Gordon Hartogensis, husband of Elaine Chow's sister and recently confirmed director of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, an agency that handles roughly $100 billion in assets. Congratulations, Gordon! According to his LinkedIn page, before being put in charge of nearly 1,000 employees, he managed the family trust. So, solid pick. Because Elaine Chow, who has received $26 million in gifts from her family's company, sure likes to help her family company, which builds its ships in state-owned shipyards in China using a state-owned steelmaker, primarily does business with China, and has generally close ties to China since the 1980s, China being the place that is currently expanding its maritime presence, as opposed to the dying shipping industry here in the U.S., an industry that Mrs. Chow's Department of Transportation has been cutting the budget of, eliminating grants to small commercial shipyards and scaling back training for American crew members. Meanwhile, her family has paid for scholarships and training programs in China. This is all according to a piece by the New York Times, the main story being that Chow used the Department of Transportation to make travel arrangements for her family members to attend business meetings in China. But after ethics concerns were brought up regarding the fact that her family was not, in fact, part of the Department of Transportation, Chow canceled the trip, like the totally not guilty person she is. Here she is, not guiltily, doing interviews with her father about his business while Department of Transportation flags hang in the background, which again, he is not a part of, and is in fact a businessman whose company is directly affected by the Department of Transportation. Solid ethics, Chow fam. Ah, geez! Who else can we talk about? There's a lot of them, most of which involve personal favors or misuse of taxpayer money. In a lot of these cases, we're talking about people who are already rich, faced with a conflict of interest, and secretly refuse to sell stock despite doing so would make them even richer in order to illegally keep the stock so that they could be even richer than even richer. Like, that's seriously the ethical question most of these people failed. But for the most part, none of this is that different than politicians before them. But there are some standouts. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross accidentally left off stock holdings from his 2018 financial disclosure form. Holdings he had agreed to sell, specifically 100 shares of Bank United stock, by the Commerce Secretary. He also hosted a meeting with Chevron executives despite his wife owning a $250,000 stake in the company. He also met with the CEO of Boeing, a company his wife also owns a stake in, this time for $2 million. And also many, many more, including possible insider trading. Nice work, Wilbur.